like I've obviously already got my preview in Lightroom for that wedding at that point. And I always send my fine tuning off from my previews as well, just because sometimes actually I probably spend more time making sure the previews are really shiny compared to a full set of, 800 photos or whatever.
Welcome to Workflows, presented by imagen-ai. Workflows is a podcast about saving you time and money in your photography business. Hear from people just like you. Put down that camera for a little, connect the headphones, and get to work with Workflows. Today I'm speaking with Hannah Hall. Hannah is an incredible photographer based in North Hampshire, UK. At the time of recording this episode, she is in her 8th year of business. Hannah describes her style as honest and emotion-driven with a bit of awesome thrown in. I would describe her style as organic and vibrant. The color she achieves and the looks she brings out in people are out of this world. When she is not shooting weddings, you can find Hannah on mountains, in a pile of dogs, or wondering what killed her latest houseplant. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Hannah Hall. Hello, Hannah.
Hello. How are you doing?
Good. What time is it by you right now?
It's just gone 2 o'clock in the afternoon here.
2 in the afternoon. Yeah, it's 9 a.m. here and
Bright
very
and
cold. Bright and early. The joys of having to do everything remotely. It's amazing that we're, 2022, we're able to record a clean video and audio podcast remotely when back, even 10 years ago, in order to do this, podcast innovators like Tim Ferriss would literally send a full package in a Pelican case across the world for his guests to have video and audio equipment for every episode. And now, you don't need to. It's amazing.
The benefits, I guess, of a pandemic have improved our skill in being able to do these kind of things as well.
Yeah.
Right.
I
didn't know how to use Zoom 2 years ago.
Most people didn't even know Zoom was a thing 2 years ago. Yeah. And interestingly, things like Google Meet, which used to be Google Hangouts, they've been around for years. I mean, Skype. Basically Zoom is a mutated Skype that has been enhanced with special abilities. So, Anyway, so it's cool. So what's going on with you? How's everything going on your end?
Things are good. It's my month off, technically. Obviously, back in the UK, basically, weddings got back to normal in July. When we say normal, restriction-free. Although weddings were back on from sort of the end of April. So I ended up photographing 53 weddings of my own in 8 months last year. Normally, I don't want to do more than 35 in 12 months. So it's been busy. We got married ourselves in the chaos as well. So it's just taking a month where I haven't got weddings to go to just catch up with editing, tweak websites, just, do all of the boring behind the scenes stuff that no one ever really sees. But actually, after last year, it's kind of a joy not to be picking up my camera every 5 minutes. It's just nice to go a bit slower and sit in my pajamas if I want to.
Yeah. In the, we just, this week actually, in the imagen-ai community, we shared, some advice for, what to do during downtime and stuff like that. And so it's perfect timing. I mean, that's why we put that content out there when we did. But, there's so much that can be done when you take a month off, when just the industry, your market is nothing for a little bit, where you can prepare your business for when everything comes back or get caught up on things that you couldn't get caught up on before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've had a list of things for months in my head of I'm going to do that. I'll do that in January. And it's now trying to put all of that into place and make it happen before I start shooting. I've got 5 weddings in February. We're still feeling the knock-on of the pandemic here, bookings-wise. I'd never normally have 5 weddings in February. So I've got a deadline to get a lot of stuff done. So I'm just chipping away quietly.
Yeah, and February's coming faster than we probably want. So my first question to you is, what is one thing that you do for the photographic process with your camera, with your lights, things like that saves you time in that part of your work?
I shoot in one white balance all day. And I've been doing that now for maybe 4 years. It means that what you see on the back of the camera sometimes, like if I'm showing my clients, looks like fresh yellow hell, particularly in the evening. It was, I guess, had Imagen been around 4 years ago, maybe it's not something that I would have needed to do, but it allowed me to batch process for different, if I was in one room, my white balance was pretty much constant rather than it being affected by colour casts and, green outside or whatever. So that has really sped up my editing time, even if it does look awful when I send my pictures. So if I've been second shooting, I'm like, just don't judge them until you've edited them.
What, out of curiosity, what white balance do you set it at?
5,500 K. So daylight, it's fine. Outside looks normal. It's just when you come inside that it starts to look a bit weird and wacky.
Yeah. Once you start going under tungsten and fluorescent lights, that's when the fun happens.
That's it. But it also it tricks Lightroom, and so sometimes Lightroom will do really crazy things with your pink green balance. Like if you're shooting where there's a lot of trees, it'll automatically put a lot of pink in. But Lightroom just goes, I don't know what to do with this, and just leaves the pink green alone. So I rarely have to tweak my pink green. I just play with my blue and yellow.
That's great. I hope others try that. I might even try that as well. So moving on to the business side of things, what is one thing that you do for your business that saves you time or money?
It's a time saver, and it's ongoing. But I rebranded at the beginning of 2017, and the sole drive behind my rebrand was to try to put people off booking me, which sounds like a weird tactic. But I was getting to the point where this time of year, Christmas and New Year engagements, I was just inundated with inquiries which were all dead. They were all dead leads. They were people who were bargain hunting, or they were people who just, I don't think, had even looked at my portfolio. They just wanted a wedding photographer. I rank quite well on Google. So I was just spending all my time. And you know what it's like. By the time you found out what venue they were getting married at, you try and find them suitable galleries to send back. It was just so time consuming that I was like, this needs to stop. I only need 35 couples a year to like me. And if I'm getting 90 inquiries in January, that's a lot of time just spent emailing.
Right.
So the biggest time saver for me, and obviously now it's an ongoing thing in terms of my online presence and how I present myself online, I guess, is to be a bit Marmitey. You either love me or you don't. Same with my work, I think. But yeah, now genuinely, I would say 75% of the inquiries I get turn into bookings, and that is a good time saver for me.
Wow. So I don't photograph weddings. My big thing, which came organically, I've talked about this on the podcast previously, is that I had an organic shift during the pandemic to photograph proposal sessions. So, surprise proposals. And I get a lot of inquiries from that. And I've got a full-time job. And so I have to turn a lot of them away or recommend other people. But it really, you do really have to, if you want the right client to not have to go through a bunch of hoops and back and forth and stuff, you really do have to present yourself how you want, the clients you want. You have to present yourself the way you want your clients to come.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Absolutely. So. And I'm really lucky now that the couples that I get to work for are super laid back. They're lovely. Their weddings are my kind of vibe. There's nothing really stuffy and formal about them. And I know there's wedding photographers for everybody, but I think generally people who are planning weddings like that also don't want to spend hours stood in a line grinning at a photographer doing family formals and that kind of thing. So it's worked well for me, and I don't spend all my time writing emails anymore.
I absolutely love not only your website but your photos. I mean, they're so punchy. They're so the way I describe it is very organic and vibrant. They're showing people how the people are. So whatever I didn't see your website before you rebranded and everything, but whatever you did, I love the changes.
Thank you.
So.
I think, like for me, being a parent really changed my perspective on what photographs should be. And like when I started reflecting, I think when I started my business, I just photographed, weddings as I thought they should be photographed. And then I thought my favorite pictures of my children are the ones of them throwing tantrums or like with food all over their face. It's not the ones where they're sat beautifully under a tree on a blanket,
Yeah.
And then when I started applying that attitude to the way I photograph weddings, that's when business really took off for me. Like all my couples want pictures of their friends being their friends. They don't just want pictures of them looking nice with a glass of champagne in their hands. They want that. Right. They want to see their personalities coming through. So that's what I'm always looking for on a wedding day.
Yeah, and I've got a similar thing to share related. So it's very similar to that. So Ben Folds, the musician from Ben Folds 5, so he's actually a photographer as well, and he historically has always photographed his kids while he's on tour. Now his kids are older at this point, but so I saw a keynote that he did at a photography show once, and he talked about how he deleted all the photos of his kids looking at the camera. I wouldn't go that far, but the ones that he kept are the ones of his kids looking out of the tour bus window, looking out of the hotel window, his kids playing, the piano while he's not supposed to be watching, stuff like that. Like his kids being kids. And while I do still have photos of my kids looking at the camera, I try to incorporate that sort of principle, the more natural, this is what it was. This is what they were doing, not only for my family, but for my clients as well. So I think it's a great lesson to learn. I still wouldn't delete photos of your kids looking at cameras though. So moving on to editing, what is one thing that you do for editing that has saved you time?
My first reaction to this question was imagine, but actually, like I thought back a little bit further, and actually, having a custom preset built for me has saved me a lot of time. And it was prompted by, I shot Canon when I started my business. I shot Canon, and I moved to Sony, and just moved my preset over, and actually it didn't work exactly how I wanted it to work on Sony files. My greens were nuclear green, people were very orange, and I couldn't, it's like I said to you earlier, like the science behind and the technology behind my business, I'm clueless about, genuinely. So I was kind of stuck in a rut, and I didn't really know what to do, and I didn't know how to fix it. So I had a custom preset built by a girl called Amy Lee Atkin. She's a Northern Preset company here in the UK, and she not only built the preset I wanted that looked at like how I wanted my skin tones to look and those kind of things, but I have like several different versions of my preset. So I have a backlit version, I have a dance floor version, which has a little bit more contrast and is a little bit more punchy just because of the way I tend to light the dance floor. It has corrections for people who do look very orange. The fake tan thing here is big. But also, sometimes where you're just in a room where the light is horrible. So I had all of these various corrections, and suddenly that combined with the one white balance thing just massively sped up my workflow, because if a picture was backlit, I could use the backlit preset rather than just my regular preset and then having to pull the shadows and the highlights around and that kind of thing. So that was a game changer for me. And I think actually, that's probably helped Imagine now, because there are lots of photos in very particular situations where those settings are applied, fairly uniformly. If it's backlit, it's had a different preset on it. So Imagine's learning from that intel, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely learned how you prefer each photo to be based on each individual, situation and what had to be adjusted. But because you started with a custom preset that was sort of uniform across the board with minor changes here and there, that definitely helped you, but also helped Imagine learn your preferences, which is cool. So yeah, it's a very smart thing having custom presets. I always have, but I've always used custom presets in a different way, more for quick actions. So if I know I like a tone curve a certain way for certain photos, I've got a preset for that tone curve. Not necessarily like major color shifts, because I've always preferred very natural edits for myself. So, but otherwise, you know, I've got a custom preset for like turn on the lens correction for this lens, like that kind of thing. Okay. So we've talked about the photographic process. We've talked about the business part of things. We've talked about editing. What is one thing you do after a wedding, after the session has ended, to increase business?
For me, it's getting a preview to my couple as quickly as I possibly can. How practical that is when you're in the thick of August, it's not always that practical, and it's not always possible, but I try to get their preview to them before their friends and family start dumping all their phone pictures on. Because if I can get them to them quickly, it's my photos that become their profile pictures, it's the ones that they're sharing online, and immediately people know who I am by the end of the wedding day because they've seen me out and about, but then they're putting what I've produced to my name as well. Right. And it also just means that everything that I'm sharing online is very current, and my couples are still excited. You know, literally like 2 or 3 days after the wedding, they're still buzzing. So they're doing lots and lots of resharing. Their suppliers are potentially getting involved in that as well. And as a result, I photograph a lot of friendship groups, weddings, or lots of, siblings. Like I've done 2 or 3 siblings' weddings and stuff. Nice.
And so when you do these previews, are you watermarking them so that everybody who sees it on Facebook and whatnot know that it was you, or are you just going with the assumption, hey, they met me at the wedding, they know who I am at the wedding, watermark's not needed?
Yeah, I don't watermark anything. There's no point. People just crop them off, or I just kind of feel like actually if you've got a big watermark in the middle of a picture, it just ruins your appreciation of it anyway. I'm quite strict with the expectations of my couples and the way that they look after their photos. So right from the get-go, like at the point that I am in potential like consultations with them before they've even booked, like I make it very clear that the photos are for them, they're not for their suppliers. If their suppliers want them, they need to come and speak to me separately, but I have an expectation that they don't put Instagram filters on them and those kind of things. And I would say that I'm now at the point when 99% of the time it just isn't a problem. They tag me. They've generally got nice things to say about me as well, which really, really helps in terms of like, here are our pictures. Hannah was great. So yeah, the watermark thing, I used to do it. I used to like pick a colour out of the picture to make the watermark like look aesthetically nice on the picture, right. But I've given up with that, and that's long gone.
Yeah. You could even put in the contract that like if when I send you the previews, if you do share them on social media, please make sure you tag me, and that basically gets around, but they're doing it for you naturally anyway, which is great.
Yeah, and I think if I look at generally flicking through Instagram now, it is becoming more of a trend that people are tagging the photographer, even if it was their friend. They're kind of, there's an element by which they're starting to recognise that someone else's work. So a lot of my couples, I think, just do it instinctively now anyway. Yeah, it works. It works for me.
Awesome. So this is the point where I'm going to ask you for a 30,000-foot view down look on Earth of an outline breakdown of your workflow from lead to delivery. You don't have to get into the deep details, but just an overview so that everybody's listening can understand this is what's worked for me. Hopefully you can take away something from it that'll work in your workflow.
Sure. So, obviously I get inquiries through my website, and I always try and respond to them as quickly as possible as well. I think my experience of having planned my own wedding recently is that I got really frustrated when suppliers didn't reply to me quickly. So with that, I'm always like, maybe not immediately, like make them stew for 10 minutes, but I do try and get back to them as quickly as possible. And I really encourage everyone to at least have a phone call with me, if not like a Zoom call. I used to do in-person meetings, but I canned those with COVID, and I don't think I'll ever go back to them, to be honest, because it means that I can sit with my pyjama bottoms on and they don't know. So I will you have a Zoom conversation with them, and normally for couples it's just them checking that I'm not completely balmy. I am completely balmy, but a good kind of balmy. And when they book, after the consultation, I'll send them a booking form, and they get to see my contract at that point, so they can ask any questions they've got about legalities. Don't shoot me, but I don't use a CRM. I still rely on my diary and a wall planner, and it served me fine for 7 years, and if it ain't broken, it doesn't need fixing. So I still do my contracts on paper. People are spending a lot of money with me, and I feel like I need to give them something, so I give them my signature on a real bit of paper in the post, and they pay their deposit, and then I send them. They get not a welcome pack. They basically get a link to a secret page on my website that's got all my recommended suppliers, hints and tips for wedding planning, just kind of what the period of time in between their booking and their wedding looks like, when they can expect to hear from me, and those kind of things. And also in there's some rules for them, like don't WhatsApp me at 11 o'clock at night 6 months before your wedding, because I won't reply. It's simple as that. Like WhatsApp on the day or the night before the wedding is fine, but not not when it's not their wedding, basically. Right. So then on the day I shoot on 2 Sony A7 IIIs, and I use both card slots, both right into RAW. The one thing that I've learned over the last 7 years is that when you're tired and ingesting cards at the end of a wedding, that's when you're most likely to make mistakes. And there have been numerous times where my files have gone into my photos have gone into 2 files. I've gone through the numbers. I don't know what that's called, but it started again, so it's in a new folder. And when I've been tired, I haven't moved the second one across. But it's okay, because I've shot on 2 sets of cards. I copy off one, and the others get put away safely in the special memory card box, and they don't get cleared until I've delivered the wedding, and they're happy. And there's been numerous times, like last year was so crazy busy that there was a lot of times that I forgot to move everything over. So the magic box of cards really saved me in that respect.
That's a really good, I hope a lot of people do a takeaway from that, because that's a huge problem that a lot of photographers have, is how do I secure things? Because you never know, the memory cards these days, you never know. And if you have a memory card that's got a fault in it, having that backup. What you're doing is taking it to a whole new level. You're not only not, wiping that card right away, but you're waiting until you deliver that wedding, which could be, a couple months, potentially, hopefully. Depending on your, how busy. Anyway.
Yeah, and we joke that we probably have shares in Kingston and SanDisk between the two of us. But I just think people are like, oh, I've got a really robust backup system. I've got Backblaze or Crash Plan or whatever, and that's great. It's important to have that too. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't backed up all the photos in the first place, user error or something went wrong, like your computer went to sleep and stopped writing, for example. Having that set of cards, and memory cards are so cheap these days, for me, it's a no-brainer that there's just always another set of pictures. And generally, if my laptop's at home, the box of memory cards is in my bag wherever I'm going, or in the car, just so that they're in separate places.
Are you labeling these when you store the memory cards temporarily until the wedding's delivered? Are you labeling them with the couple's name, with the date of the wedding? How are you organizing? Yeah, they go.
I have those tiny little plastic bags that you might get. I don't even know where they are. They're, little baggies with the press thing. Right. And I just literally just Sharpie the couple's name on them, and then the box that I have for them, I can just put them in chronological order. Nice.
I like it.
It's old school, but it's effective.
Yeah, it works.
It does work. So at that point, if it really depends on what time I get back from a wedding. A lot of my weddings aren't close to home, so I stay away for work quite a lot. So at some point then I will go through and pick out a preview, and doing that while the wedding is still fresh in my head saves me time, because I know I've probably got an idea of at least 30 pictures that I definitely want to include in the preview. And I always try and make sure that I deliver like a family photo for each of the couples, immediate family, just because I think it's nice for them to be able to give those to parents and grandparents quickly. And then I look for there's probably some key moments, there's normally a confetti photo in there. There's normally portraits, there's normally a first kiss, you know, the stuff that they really, really love. And then there's a few in there that are just my favourites, you know, the really silly moments where like their friend has just spilt their drink down their front and those kind of things. They go in there too, just so that they can see that like they can start to really get a flavour of the things that they missed while they were busy, you know, talking to people and stuff, because loads of other stuff's going on that they don't get to see, and it's my job to fill in those gaps. So like in a preview I aim for 60-ish photos, and that keeps them going. That gets them off my back if I'm in the middle of wedding season, or like I am at the moment where I've got a big backlog of work. I haven't had anyone hounding me for pictures this wedding season, because they're like, oh, we've got loads of stuff, and they can make their thank you cards and all of those kind of things. So that's my next step. So obviously then it might be several weeks between doing the preview and actually coming to look at their set. I'm hoping to completely change my workflow this year now that Imagen is a thing, but it's not tried and tested yet. This is just how I work at the moment. So when I come to work on their set, I cull in photo mechanic. And culling is like the one thing that I am exceptionally good at. I cull my weddings and my husband's weddings because he's really rubbish at culling. But I can generally cull a wedding of 5,000-6,000 images in an hour. There are probably some photos in there that are duplicates because I want to be able to see what they look like when they're edited, and I do lose probably a couple of hundred in the final edit. But I'd rather spend the time really looking carefully at them once they're edited, or at least semi-edited, before I make a decision about what's staying and what's going. Right. So that all comes into Lightroom. I tell it to stop building previews immediately, and then it goes to Imagen. And if I've obviously already got my preview in Lightroom for that wedding at that point, and I always send my fine-tuning off from my previews as well, just because sometimes actually I'd probably spend more time making sure the previews are really shiny compared to a full set of, 800 photos or whatever.
Small batch versus large batch. Small batch versus large batch. The client isn't going to look as carefully at a large batch than they would the small batch.
Exactly. And actually, going back to that kind of like what's in your memory, when I'm doing the preview for the wedding, that wedding being fresh in my head means I've got a much better memory of what colours particularly look like, whereas 8 weeks later I might have forgotten what some of the colours were really like and that kind of thing. So having the preview there already as a reference point is really, really handy. Right. So obviously before I send it off to Imagen, I tell it not to re-edit my previews. I have done it once by accident, sent that back. That was quite annoying. You can always undo
it in Lightroom.
But I undid it, but it's just, when you're working through quickly and you got I'd forgotten what was colour flagged and stuff. Anyway, it's fine. So it goes off to Lightroom, to Imagen, and I go and make a cup of tea. That's really important, like utilising your time. It doesn't matter how much I need the toilet or how thirsty I am. I'm like, it doesn't happen until it's being sent to Imagen. That's the way we roll here.
Is there a specific type of tea that you make while you're waiting for your edits to come back from Imagen?
So I used to just drink whatever tea, like whatever, generic kind of English tea there was going, until I met my husband, and now it has to be Yorkshire tea. So that's all we drink in this house.
So he's a tea snob.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's probably even more of a coffee snob, to be honest. Like we hand pour our coffees in this house and hand grind and everything. But he's just very particular about his tea, and I'm not that fussed, so I'll just drink whatever. But that's what we have now. So all of those kind of, like go and put the washing on, all of those things happen in the 25 minutes or so that it takes for the gallery to upload to Imagen, and come back from Imagen. So then also, generally I'll open it up in Lightroom and tell it to build all my previews and go and do another job somewhere else, go and reply to emails and stuff while that's happening. Right. 5-10 minutes later, we're good to edit. And Imagen, on average, I'd say now I can turn a full wedding round, the editing as in the colour correction, the straightening and all of those things in 2 hours if I just sit down and do it. Whereas before that might have taken me a day and a half. So the time saving is massive. At that point, as I'm going through, I'm not a massive Photoshop person. I don't I don't believe in manipulating people's bodies or their skin particularly, unless it's something like a spot which needs removing. So my rule with Photoshop is that if there's something in the background that catches my attention twice, then it gets Photoshopped out. So that, like in the UK, they're really, really keen on putting fire exit signs everywhere. Or there's normally, like, they do really stupid things, like put the cake in front of a plug on the wall.
Right.
Couldn't you have just moved the table like 4 inches? But so it's those kind of things. If they catch my attention twice, that's when I get rid of them. So I just flag everything that needs photoshopping, and then I take the Photoshop in last. Very occasionally there is stuff beyond my skill set. So obviously at that point I have to send it to my retoucher, but she's amazing. Her turnaround is always really, really quick. And she, like last year, actually an associate shot a wedding for me in London on the South Bank. And Larissa managed to basically rebuild the entirety of the South Bank with no tourists in it. Which I could never have done. I don't know how she did it. Like, Reese and I both use her, and when the photos came back, our jaws were just on the floor. So yeah, there's a time and a need for these things, and Larissa is one person that I wouldn't be without. But I'm getting better at my own Photoshop slowly. And once the photos are back from Photoshop, that's it. I export them and I upload them to Pixieset. And at the moment, I used to deliver an online gallery and a physical product. So I used to do a USB with a print box and a selection of my favourite prints. But quite a lot of my couples were like, we don't have a USB port. So this memory stick is useless to us. I was getting my USBs and my print boxes from Kitty Albums in Poland. And since we left the EU... it means that these things are more expensive to bring into the country. So I am actually in the process of phasing out USBs for that reason. So this year I've given all my couples the option of either having some print credit or having the USB. And most of them have taken the print credit because I think they've just realised they can just download it from Pixieset and, stick it in their Google Drive or whatever.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And that's kind of the end of the process in terms of the delivery. Then if I go on, if I want to blog their wedding, they have a questionnaire that they fill out for their blog. I incentivise that with print credit as well. I think it's much more interesting reading about someone's wedding from their point of view than my point of view. Why they made certain choices and those kind of things. And I guess that's the end of the process, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the end of me using the pictures or the end of my relationship with my couples. The best thing about my couples is that I stay in touch with most of them and go drinking with them and stuff now, so that's nice.
Definitely. Yeah, that's you just shared a whole bunch of things that I really hope that a lot of the listeners take away and consider implementing themselves in their top bottom workflow, because very smart things. So you and I already spoke about this before we started recording this episode, and you even mentioned it just now once, that you're not very technical. You're not, like most photographers, not very technical. You use imagen-ai, which we really appreciate. We love that you're a customer of ours and you're in the community. But obviously you don't understand how it works. You're like, it's, to you, it's magic. It's witchcraft, and it is. To a lot of the customers, they don't understand how it works. But I'm going to ask you a question, and we'll see if you have an answer. If you don't, it's fine. What does the future of artificial intelligence in photography look like to you?
I do have an answer for this. I did think about this. I think. Great. From what obviously, I have learned a little bit about Imagen and how it works now as a result of being in the community, but I think the long and the short of it is that AI is only going to get more clever. Mm-hmm. Right? So for me, the future, I guess, is being able to have for wedding photographers venue specific profiles. At the moment I just have one Imagen profile. I think, long term it would be a case of you've shot at this venue, I've got a separate profile for that venue, just because there are some things, there are venues that I'm recommended at, one I was there 8 times last year, another I was there 5, and there are some very specific things that I might do at those venues, and I do them every wedding I edit because of the windows or because of where top table is put and those kind of things. So I guess for me, that's what the future looks like. You know, AI learning more about me specifically and how I work. I did try to think about how like artificial intelligence might change more of my workflow, and at the moment I'm not convinced there's anything more it can do. Like I know there's products that will cull. For me, it's not something that I feel like I need because I'm so quick at it. And the jury still seems to be out about people that are using artificial intelligence for culling. But yeah, I guess it's how artificial intelligence can be more specific, like starting to learn about how I might do brushwork or how I might use radial filters and those kind of things. Right. I guess it's coming. Like I know now that like Imagen is straightening better for me all the time. So surely soon it will learn when I use a radial filter and do that too.
Yeah, we are working on local adjustments. From what I understand, the first that we're going to have is going to be a standard brush as sort of a proof of concept that, hey, our AI works for local adjustments too. Once we've proven the concept, we can then take what we've coded and built for brushes and port them over to the other, local adjustment features as well. So I agree. It's just going to get smarter and even more personalized as time goes by, which is very exciting. So this is a very deep, second to last question, very deep question. How did imagen-ai impact your life?
So, obviously, I started using Imagen in some very, very specific circumstances. In September, the beginning of September, just after I'd shot 14 weddings in August. On the way coming home from a wedding, my husband and I were involved in a car accident. It was a hit and run on the motorway, and like how either of us walked away from the crash is a miracle, really. Like the pictures of the car that I've seen don't really represent what my car looked like before the crash. So after the accident, I was in hospital for a week. I had 2 operations to reconstruct my arm, and then 2.5-3 weeks later, I had to have another operation because things didn't quite go to plan. And that meant that I shot all my weddings, apart from the 2 that I was in hospital for. I went to some of them and had seconds and thirds to kind of pick up where I couldn't shoot. But that obviously meant that I still had a massive backlog of editing from the summer because of the summer being the summer. And then I had this backlog of weddings that I hadn't even looked at because I was literally sitting in bed until I had to go and shoot a wedding, come home, go back to bed. And suddenly I found myself, I guess at the beginning of October, with 20 weddings to edit, and the grey cloud of having that much editing on your shoulders. On my own, I average 4,000 to 5,000 photos a wedding. If Reese is shooting with me, he shoots similar, so I can have 10,000 rules to look at, for each wedding. And actually, the impact on my mental health, never mind everything that had gone on surrounding the car accident, was massive just because of the backlog that I had. And someone said to me, "Oh, you need to try Imagen." And I was like, yeah, but how? How can it just do this stuff for me? It didn't make sense. And then I was like, when you're in the thick of it, you're like, I haven't got time to do this. Like all my time, it all boiled down to the fact that I couldn't put my elbow down because of where the damage was to my arm. So I was like, all the time that I've got where I can put my elbow down on the desk, I now need to spend editing. I haven't got hours to be like pulling out photos to send to see if it works. But I thought, well, what have I got to lose? Because ultimately, I can send all that stuff off overnight when I'm not, while I'm sleeping, the computer can be doing that work for me. And I've still got to edit the wedding. So if it doesn't work when I apply it to the first wedding I'm going to work on, I haven't lost any time because I can just reset everything and off I go. And so I sent off, it was a big wedding. I'd shot it on my own, but there was nearly 200 guests and a lot of speeches, and just a lot had happened that day, so it was a big gallery. And I sent it off and I sat here waiting for it to come back, and it just blew my mind. Everything that was outdoors was perfect. I kept resetting it and applying my preset, and I I couldn't see a difference. And indoors, it needed some work. And over time, like, obviously, I don't know how many weddings I've delivered since that first wedding that I sent, but I think I'm well over the 5,000 for it to have started, you know, adjusting my profile. Like, it's now, like, generally, sometimes if something looks a bit wacky, I'm like, oh, I wonder if I can make it better. And I'm like, no, actually, like, Imagen has still given me a better starting point from which to make adjustments. So I basically went from maybe spending 8 hours, probably 5 to 8 hours, depending on the length of the wedding and whether I had a second, to spending 2 hours tweaking a set. And you can imagine if you've got 20 weddings, and you're in quite a lot of pain sat at your desk, to suddenly be, you know, that's like, I don't know, that's like 160 hours worth of work down to doing the maths. I can't do the maths, but like, it's such a time saver. And even when it doesn't quite get it right, it's still, I don't know, it's like, Imagen still got a better handle on it. And I can't, like, all the time, whenever I'm talking to people about how they have to just give it a try, I'm like, you can't go wrong, because actually getting it set up isn't this massive time-consuming process that I thought it was going to be. And I know that obviously I've got a very unique set of circumstances, but all of us could benefit from having more time not working. I think when we own our own businesses, we're all guilty of having a really terrible work-life balance. And actually,
you were in between surgeries and you were doing weddings. Like, you want to talk about work-life balance? That you shouldn't have been doing those weddings.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done. But in normal circumstances, maybe I wouldn't have done. But some of my couples were 4 or 5 times postponed, and it just felt like it was, I don't know, I just felt so bad for them, being like, oh, I know you've had to postpone 5 times, but now you also don't get the photographer of your choice. So like, it felt nice to be there and have a distraction, but also one of my brides is a physiotherapist, and she was like, I haven't had to have any physio on my arm now, it's all healed. And she was like, the best thing that you probably did, in fact, was go and lift your camera up to your eye a few times a week, just in terms of like my mobility and stuff. So but we were talking about this before we started recording, like, we've basically been able to take January off. And I've still got editing to do, but if I think to how long editing was taking me before, like, I'd probably still be editing September now, not like the beginning of November. And I would be rolling my eyes about having to edit rather than just being like, yeah, it's okay, it's just another day and I'm just going to do another wedding and crack that out today. Yeah. So yeah, I can't recommend it enough.
So, I do tell people that the most time-consuming part is getting their profile, teaching imagen-ai, a profile, because you're talking 5,000 photos at a minimum. You were in the mix of, injury, trying to get these new weddings done, plus your backlog of weddings. Were you already organized ahead of time to the point where you were able to quickly just send 5,000 photos to teach, or did you have to, organize yourself ahead, before you sent it off?
No, I had them. I guess the one drawback, I suppose, is if you are newer to the game and you don't have loads and loads of photos. Like Reese, my husband, he's not been shooting for as long as me, and he, like everyone, has kind of been through that, like, oh, this is my preset. No, this is my preset. So he's got a lot of work edited in a style that he didn't want to include. So it took him a bit longer to get his profile going for that reason. Whereas, like, I'm quite lucky. No one understands my storage system apart from me, but everything was already there on my computer ready to go. So it wasn't a massive task of, trying to like pull things out and find things, because I knew where it all was to send it.
It's great. Always stay organized.
Even if no one else understands.
As long as it's organized in your head, that's all that matters.
That's it.
So, Hannah, where can listeners learn more about you, connect with you, and of course see your beautiful photography?
They can find me on my website, which is hannahallphotography.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram, just at Hannah Hall Photography. You probably see, I kind of feel like my website is a good experience of what it would be like to come and have tea with me anyway, but I think perhaps my day-to-day chaos and the things that make me tick are probably a little bit more evident on Instagram and my Instagram stories. But they're the best places to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Hannah, for that incredible conversation all about your workflows. And thank you to those listening who listened through. And I hope you gathered a whole bunch of insights from Hannah in this episode. You are invited to be a part of the bigger conversation. Join the imagen-ai community today by going to imagen-ai.com/community. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You've been listening to Workflows presented by imagen-ai. To see the show notes and everything referenced in this episode, please go to imagen-ai.com/podcast.